Welcome to this episode of the Sports Detective Podcast Show. My name is James Williams, and today, Bronny James NBA Draft stock has skyrocketed after his performance at the NBA Draft Combine. Just how much has it improved? Well, earlier this year, ESPN was mocking Bronny James to go undrafted in this year's draft, and now, after the Combine, he has skyrocketed from number 98 to number 54 in ESPN's mock draft. Just to kind of give you a few of the good and the bad from this draft combine for Bronny James. Here's some of the good. He had the sixth best vertical leap, and this is something, if you watched him at USC would use him on jump balls at times, and he is a very, as we'll get to here in a minute, not necessarily the biggest guard. So that is something that Bronny has had in his game for a while now. He definitely inherited his dad's vertical leap, the sixth best in the draft combine. I believe it was like around 42.25 inches, if my memory is correct on that. Here's another thing that Bronny did. Even though he didn't necessarily have the best statistics shooting in college or even in high school, he went 19 of 25 in the on-the-move shooting drill, which was second overall in the combine and first in his position. So that is showing off some potentially for Bronny James to improve on his jump shot. And from a statistical measure there, he did okay in the scrimmages that he had. His shooting, again, wasn't the best, but he did show a lot of willingness and a lot of aggression on the defensive side of the ball that did catch scouts' eyes. As you guys probably know, too, he did measure in a little bit over 6'1", which he was listed at 6'4" at USC. This is a thing that the NBA has been doing the last few years now. I don't know if you guys remember. I can't remember when it was. It was either 2 or 3 years ago. The NBA basically remeasured all of their players' heights, and that's why you saw some players like gain or lose inches, which was kind of funny. Because it used to be like the guys would basically tell you how tall they were. That's how it used to be. So there's some guys, like Kevin Durant for a while, I believe like early on in his career, he was like, yeah, I'm like 6'9". And it's like, we all knew that was absolute BS because it's like KD's like obviously like 7 feet tall. So Bronny comes in at 6'1". If you're looking at his physical kind of a comp physically to who he will look like on the next level, the physical comps are Gabe Vincent and Gary Harris, which are kind of, I think, the prototypical player that people are projecting Bronny to be, kind of like, a tougher defensive type player that plays more off the ball offensively. So that is kind of the Bronny James. And again, a lot of the other drills that he did in the combine too, he was more average at those. Nothing really sticked out for him to be great at those. He was kind of middle of the road and a lot of that stuff. But I do want to talk about this here a little bit because, we talked about this earlier this year, talking about Bronny James and his draft stock. And we were kind of like, hey, I think he's going to go undrafted because I don't think he is an NBA player right now. And we still might be right about that. He's not an NBA player right now, but we were wrong on the fact that I think Bronny is going to get drafted in this year's draft. And I want to talk about why he may get drafted, and I'm going to tell you 6 possible teams that I think he could potentially get drafted to. So, as we know, the Bronny James experience has been, very much hyped up. His draft process has very much been hyped up over the past, year or two, because his dad had a quote a while ago that said, hey, a goal of mine and a thing that he said would value very heavily in his career would be to one day play with his son on the same NBA court. And a lot of people, I think, took that and ran it in a direction where it didn't need to go. Because I always thought people were reading into that too much, because I was like, he's not going to go play on the Pistons if the Pistons draft him, or the Wizards. Like he's not going to do that. But because of that, and because of that quote, I do think that there are some teams that might be contenders that have picks later in the draft, late first round, second round, that might say, hey, we'll take a flyer on Bronny because maybe LeBron can then talk himself into coming to our team. So I definitely think that is something that some teams may consider if they do want to draft Bronny. Now, that doesn't mean that maybe like the Grizzlies have a decent amount of picks in this draft too, that they're not a team on my list, but maybe there's a team like that might be like, we'll draft him and see what happens. Maybe there's kind of like a a deal that Clutch makes, because that is a thing too. Sometimes, especially in the NBA draft, guys in the second round, sometimes they get drafted just because their agents have power and they're like, hey, help me out here. Help me out. I helped you out with this other deal previously, or we'll help you out with somebody in free agency this summer, but we aren't going to do that unless you draft my other client here in the second round. And that is something that NBA teams do all the time. It happens a lot more often than you would think. But I want to talk about the 6 teams that would potentially draft Bronny James, in the fact that it might lure his dad, LeBron James. Because as you guys know, LeBron James is a free agent this summer. And even though they have kind of walked back a lot of that talk over the last few weeks about like, hey, like I'm not going to go to, LeBron's like, hey, I'm not going to go to the team that drafts Bronny. Or it's like, I do think that just because he said that doesn't mean he won't, but it doesn't mean that teams that drafts him automatically he will go to. But I do think there might be some spots where it's like he might just kind of walk that back again and be like, hey, well, this team drafted him. Sure, I'll go and play on this team. And more because of the reality of like, hey, I might actually have a better chance of winning a championship on this team that drafted my son than I do on the Lakers if I re-sign there. So let's go through these 6 teams. I have 6 teams here that I think could potentially draft Bronny James in hopes of getting their dad. And the first team is obviously the team that LeBron plays on, currently has played on them the last few years, and that is the Los Angeles Lakers. And the Los Angeles Lakers have 1 pick in this year's draft, and that is the 55th overall pick. I do think that is something that the Lakers very much, I think if he's available at 55, I think they take him. So I think that is the number 1 spot. And that's where, if you're going to be exploring mock drafts over the next few weeks, as we're about a month out from the draft, that is going to be the one spot that everyone's going to mock him at. There might be some people that mock him a little bit higher. There was like a report that the Utah Jazz might consider him at the 32nd pick. So there's a chance that he might not be available at 55. But if he's available at 55, I think the Lakers will absolutely take him. Okay, let's talk about another team, the Golden State Warriors. The Golden State Warriors have the 52nd pick in this year's draft. If you guys remember, around the trade deadline this year, the Lakers and the Warriors were talking about trading LeBron James to the Golden State Warriors. And then when they brought this up with LeBron and they brought it up to his agent, Rich Paul, they said, no, we do not want to go to the Warriors. We want to stay on the Lakers. Does that talk maybe change if they draft Bronny? Does it maybe change? The Warriors are going to be shaking stuff up this summer because they did not make the playoffs this year. So they're going to be looking to change some things up. We know that LeBron has kind of become he's definitely become buddies with Draymond, and I think he's become friendly with Steph. So if you're telling me it's LeBron, Steph, Draymond, Golden State Warriors, Bronny, I could see that happening. Next team. This team got knocked out in the first round this year, and I can definitely, this is the one team on this list that I could see drafting him that had no assurances that LeBron would be coming. Because here's another part of this here too, guys, is that there might be a little bit of a, the Windhorst finger guns thing that he did. There might be a thing of like, why is this team drafting Bronny? Maybe there's already a deal in place for LeBron James to potentially come. But this is the one team I think on this list that would do it without with the hopes of like, hey, we think we can get LeBron from this deal, without having any conversations with LeBron or his people about this. And that team is the Philadelphia 76ers. The Philadelphia 76ers have a tremendous amount of cap space this summer, mostly because they haven't re-signed Tyrese Maxey because he's a restricted free agent. The math on that, though, is that they have been trying to recruit Paul George. And if they sign Paul George to a huge extension, then they can restricted sign Tyrese Maxey. It's kind of a weird way that the numbers have to work out with that. But you could easily just throw LeBron James in that Paul George spot. Could easily do that, especially if you have indications that Paul is going to stay on the Clippers. That is definitely something you could do if you're the Philadelphia 76ers, and they have the 16th pick and the 41st pick. I definitely could see the Sixers potentially using one of those picks on Bronny James. 16 would seem outrageous to take him that high, but I don't know if you're getting indications that some other team, and let's actually just talk about that team, that maybe another team would take him a few spots later. What about the New York Knicks? New York Knicks, remember LeBron 2009 was thinking about, or excuse me, 2010 was thinking about the Knicks, and the pitch to LeBron was like, hey, you can come here and become a billionaire. Now he ended up not going to the Knicks, but the Knicks have been completely rejuvenized over the last few years. They have a fun, tough team, but they don't necessarily, I know we know Brunson's awesome, but they don't necessarily have that huge star, that huge global star that LeBron James could be. The New York Knicks have 24, 25, and the 38th pick. So they have 3 picks. Maybe the Knicks are like, hey, screw it. Bronny's a defensive guy. Tom Thibodeau loves defensive guys. Even if you can't get LeBron out of it, maybe you get some sort of, versatile defender or, pit bull defender, maybe like a Miles McBride type. So I definitely think that the Knicks could potentially be a team that you look out for, especially mostly with the Knicks too. It's the fact that they have 3 picks. And after one of those picks, again, this is a really shallow draft, not a lot of talent in this draft. So maybe they just say, screw it. We'll do it with one of these picks. Okay, I've got 2 more teams here. This one I think is probably the biggest long shot on this list because it's a small market team, but I do think that there is a way that LeBron can work the narrative and say there's a reason that he's coming to this team other than them, or in addition to, is a better way to say that, to them drafting his son. And that team is the San Antonio Spurs. The San Antonio Spurs have the next generational player, Victor Wembanyama, who is going to win Defensive Player of the Year next year, who's going to be an All-NBA player next year, who is probably one of the most unique players, if not the most unique player we've ever seen in NBA history. They have a ton of cap space. They have a ton of assets. They have the 4th and 8th pick this year, and they also have the 35th and the 48th picks this year. Is there a chance that they use one of those picks, those second-round picks on Bronny, sign LeBron because they have a lot of cap space, and then you have their own picks, plus the Atlanta Hawks picks from the Trae Young trade to potentially trade for another star? And then you could say you have Bronny, LeBron, 3rd star, blank, and Victor Wembanyama, and LeBron James could say, hey, I always wanted to play for a top 5 coach all time, and I think I can now do that with Greg Popovich. I definitely think, again, it's a long shot because it's hard to see LeBron playing in San Antonio, but I definitely think it's a small possibility. All right, last one here. This last team that we're going to talk about has the 58th pick in the draft this year. That is the last pick, Mr. Irrelevant, in the NBA draft, and that team is the Dallas Mavericks. Now, the chance that the Dallas Mavericks would do this in an attempt to lure LeBron James might be difficult because, one, as we talked about, it's the last pick in the draft, and there's a bunch of other teams that might take a swing at Bronny before this. But if you wanted to do the reasons of why, basically this could be like the tipping point that it could be the reason that LeBron would want to follow Bronny to the Dallas Mavericks. And these are the reasons. 1, Kyrie Irving, LeBron James, well on the record, or at least not on the record. That's a bad way to say that. But I think we all know that LeBron wanted the Lakers to either sign or trade for Kyrie. And the Lakers kind of said, Kyrie seems like he's got a lot of baggage right now. And as you guys have been, if you've been watching this playoffs, Kyrie has been an upstanding citizen and an upstanding teammate for the Dallas Mavericks. So do we see a LeBron-Kyrie reunion in Dallas? I think it's a possibility. Another thing here, too. The Lakers were going to sign Jason Kidd to be their head coach a few years ago, but there was like some bad PR that kind of came out with him with he had some very public, things going on with his wife, and that was enough of a PR scare that the Lakers were scared away from hiring Jason Kidd to be their head coach. He eventually ends up in Dallas. So LeBron could kind of, sway the narrative and be like, hey, I always wanted to play for Jason Kidd. I played against him for several years, and I wanted him to be my coach with the Lakers, and I wanted them to get Kyrie Irving. And then you also have Luka Doncic. Now, the thing that is maybe impeding this is the fact that the Dallas Mavericks, I do think people are going to pick, everyone's probably going to pick Minnesota over them, but I do think they have a shot to actually win the championship this year. And if they got, let's say, knocked out in the first round or knocked out by OKC in the second round, I do think they'd have more of a incentive to try and figure out a way to get LeBron on their team, including using Bronny as kind of like that piece to finally lure him to Dallas. But so I just think the fact that they're going so far in the playoffs, maybe that's something where they're like, hey, we don't want to disrupt what we have, because again, they're a team that's going to they would have to trade multiple pieces to clear up the cap space to get LeBron. So I don't know if they'd want to do that, but that is probably the last team that I could consider potentially trading for drafting Bronny James in an attempt to also lure his dad to come play alongside his son. So yeah, that's going to do it for this episode here today. Guys, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this, help me out. Hit that subscribe button. We really need to get our subs up. That's the best way to get this channel to grow. Also hit that like button. That helps push us out into the algorithm. And two, guys, let me know what you think in the comments. Is there a team that I forgot? Do you guys think he'll get drafted? Do you think he's going to get drafted in the second round, first round? Let me know you guys' Bronny James thoughts. I would love to hear them. So again, thank you guys so much for watching the show. If this is your first time watching the video, maybe explore our page a little bit. We talk about a bunch of different sports, and you might find some other videos that you like. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.